It's 14 minutes past 7 now, listening to that in the Wellington studio. The Trade Minister, David Parker, good morning.
Good morning.
So listening to that, it sounds like this move is not going to make much difference, or indeed could be solving a problem that's not there.
Well, it's not going to collapse house prices, and it's true that this was more of a problem 2 years ago when there was a price bubble building around the world that we imported into New Zealand through some of the large flows of capital that were at that time moving into the New Zealand residential property market, especially in Auckland.
So why do it now then?
Because if you don't do it now, you can never do it, because if TPP is entered into, then New Zealand will have lost the policy space to protect the New Zealand housing market for New Zealanders. We think, one, it's an important point of principle. Two, it does affect the marginal price substantially at some parts of the property cycle, and if you don't do it now, you never can.
OK, so this, just to be clear, is about all citizens, residents of New Zealand and Australians will still be able to buy homes here?
Correct.
Permanent residents? Or just those with their first resident visa?
Permanent residents are certainly covered. People who are here long term but are not yet permanent residents, we're going to consider their position, but short term.
But what does that mean, consider their position? If you decide you're going to move here but you can only get the initial resident visa before you get your permanent residency, are you allowed to buy a house or not?
That will be clear by the time the legislation's introduced. There are some people here who
But you're not clear on that now?
We're clear that we want to find a solution for people who are here long term.
But how do you decide whether people are here long term or not?
Well, one of the options is, as you have said, just to limit it to permanent residents, but we're looking at whether you can be slightly more relaxed than that.
Do you think it's likely that you will come down just with it being permanent residents, because that is a way of demonstrating that you anticipate being here long term?
That's one of the possible outcomes, yeah.
OK, so the evidence then that this is needed, where's that coming from?
I've got absolutely no doubt that 2 years ago, when the property market was hot in Auckland, when there were large capital flows coming from some other countries to New Zealand, going primarily into residential property, that it had an effect on house prices in Auckland. That was both bad for people trying to buy houses in New Zealand, but
Do you have evidence that it was foreign buyers driving that, though?
But it also distorted the wider economy by driving excessive investment into housing at the cost of the productive economy, which we need to grow jobs and wealth in society.
Sure, but where's the evidence that that was the case?
We don't have perfect evidence because the government refused to measure how big that was. We all know that...
Does that mean then that you're essentially working on Labour's data from 2015 between February and April, which said that almost 40% of the transactions were to people with Chinese-sounding names in parts of Auckland?
No, it doesn't. There is absolutely no doubt. In fact, it's one of the most basic propositions of economic theory that when you have increased demand, you have an upward effect on price. There can be no doubt that overseas buyers have an effect on the marginal price of housing in New Zealand. The only question is, how big is that effect?
Well, marginal price of housing in itself doesn't sound like that big a deal, but also you seem to be saying you're making policy on a hunch.
That's quite wrong, Susie.
Well, you have no data.
Can I mention another principle that is at large here? I have, and the Labour Party and our coalition partners in New Zealand First and our supporters from the Greens think that homes should be for people to live in. They shouldn't be international trading chips. That is a value that we hold irrespective of the price effects. How's
this going to work then? So if you want to buy a house here, is everyone going to have to turn up with their passport when they do that?
No. We envisage that it will be made illegal for a non-resident, non-citizen to buy New Zealand homes. How that will be enforced for those, for the majority of us to whom it doesn't apply, is through a certificate probably that's put on a transfer document by a solicitor at the time the sale is processed through the Land Registry Office.
So that means that people can turn up to open homes, or they can turn up to auctions, and they could potentially buy a house, but then find later that they're not actually entitled to do so.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse in any area of the law, and if an overseas person wants to come here and buy a house, I'm sure that the real estate agent will be telling them, oh, look, you better check that you're entitled to buy a house if you're from overseas.
So will you be recommending or urging real estate agents to be asking everyone who comes through the door effectively, whether they are a New Zealand resident or a New Zealand citizen.
I think it's a matter of ordinary conversation as to where you live when you're dealing with someone buying a house.
But conversation has to happen there, though, doesn't it?
Well, I'm sure real estate agents will do that without any problem at all.
But you don't feel the need to ensure that that's the case? We're not going to have a situation where multiple housing sales can be falling over because suddenly it gets to the lawyers and the lawyers say, nah, can't do it.
Well, the purchaser would then be in breach of contract and they would have a different problem. No, I don't see a problem here at all.
Okay. So can foreigners, will they be able to buy a house or indeed multiple houses off the plans?
They will if they are being built for on sale. So if a purchaser wants to buy land or land including a plan to build a house, they will be entitled to do that because it's adding to supply so long as that house is going to then be on-sold or put into the rental market, not if it's going to be occupied by the buyer.
Okay, so how are you going to enforce that?
Because they will be an overseas purchaser of residential property who will need to apply for approval to do it, and the condition of approval will set that out.
How much bureaucracy is this going to add to the whole setup? I mean, are you, for example, thinking you're going to have to bolster the Overseas Investment Office pretty significantly?
The Overseas Investment Office will need some more staff to deal with the small number of people who, as a residue, want to buy a house to on-sell or rent.
What sort of increase?
Well, we're modelling that at the moment, and until we've completed that modelling, I can't give you that exact number.
Are you able to give us a sense, though? 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people?
You're talking 10 or tens, not hundreds.
Okay. Australians, though, still will be able to buy houses here. Foreigners, too, are they still going to be able to buy commercial property?
They'll be able to buy commercial property. And indeed, if the primary use of the property is commercial and it's got a caretaker flat at the top of a multi-storey commercial building, that will be exempt. Australians are exempt on the same basis as that the Australians have exempted us from exactly the same rule that they've already got in Australia.
What about farms? Foreigners be able to buy farms?
We've also said that we're going to tighten the discretion around farm sales. At the moment, they're virtually all waved through. We think that the ministerial discretion to approve farm sales to foreigners should be narrowed. Our reasons for that are again that we think young farmers who are graduating from share milker to farmer shouldn't be priced out by a foreign buyer, remembering that foreign buyers of New Zealand farms, they don't generally increase farm output. They use New Zealand farm systems and they use New Zealand farm managers. So we don't think there's any economic cost to us saying, well, they should be New Zealand owned as well.
Now, what about Australian companies or pension funds, for example? Will they still be able to buy homes in New Zealand?
Yes.
Okay. You don't know the makeup of the company's shareholders, though, do you?
Well, if we're using the existing definition of overseas person, which applies to other transactions already under the Overseas Investment Act, and if 25% of the purchaser is beneficially owned by an overseas person, then that is caught, and otherwise it's not.
Okay, but it could be a bit of a loophole there by the sound of things.
I don't think it's a substantial loophole at all, and it's the same rule that already applies to other classes of overseas investment.
Just briefly, how much is this going to add? What cost is there going to be added to buying a house with this introduction?
Well, for first home buyers, the effect will be that it will reduce costs because there will be lower marginal pressure. You know, the previous government said this couldn't be done. We were misled in respect of that. We've proven it can be done legally. It needs to be done now because otherwise we lose the policy space to do it. And we're in our view, the previous government was standing up for overseas buyers. We're standing up for Kiwis.
Thank you very much, David Parker. That's the Trade Minister joining us in the Wellington studio. Appreciate your time. It's now 23 minutes past 7.
Neighbours of a water pump station